is Daf Kuf Tet 109. We are, as everyone knows, 3 days away after today from finishing. And so very exciting. I don't know if we discussed the Siyam, but we should. So
we should.
I'll leave it at that. We should definitely discuss one, maybe next Shabbat or whatever.
Right.
I'm happy to participate. Maybe we'll do it on the WhatsApp and people will chime in. So the Mishnah, I assume, Miriam, you got to the bottom of Kovchet Amabet. There's a Mishnah.
Yeah.
We have a series of Mishnayot of these machloket between Hanan and Admon and others who jump in to argue one way or the other. But this Mishnah continues the series, and our Mishnah has an interesting case. Posek ma'ot dechatno. Person set aside a certain amount of money for his son-in-law. So he has a wonderful daughter. He wants to get married, and he promises to support the son-in-law, for 10 years, like a king or something. And then pashat lo et harega. Then now Rashi is very unclear about what this means. It generally means he went bankrupt, right? Meaning his feet fell out from under him, so he can no longer support him. That's one interpretation. Rashi's got other interpretations about it, but that's the easiest one. Okay.
That's how Steinsaltz translates it, but bankruptcy isn't a thing in halakha.
So he no longer has the funds, whether bankruptcy or not. He promised this money. The money's not there anymore. So his feet have fallen out from under him. So his son-in-law. Now remember, the son-in-law did kiddushin, but it hasn't done nisuin yet, right? So they did they made an agreement, and he did the kiddushin, but he hasn't consummated or finished the marriage yet. So says the Mishnah, the son-in-law or the future son-in-law can say, tough, I was promised a certain amount of money. I'm not going forward with the marriage until I get the money. Teshev, she can sit, this woman, Ad Talbin Rosha, until her hair turns white, which is 12 would be a long time, right? So meaning I don't have to give her a get, and she can't marry anybody else because she's kiddushin, right? There's erusin. But I'm not going to do anything until you pay up, so you can hold him sort of blackmail. That's the Tanakam. Admon Omer. Now Admon says, I disagree. Yicholah Hishite Amar. The wife or the girl, the woman can say, look, I didn't promise to support you. Ilo ani pasakti latzmi. If I had promised to support you and that was a condition, then it would be fair to punish me. But achshav she'aba pasak, mani yecholah lasot. What responsibility or what involvement do I have in my father's my father's inflated promises? O kenos o petur. Listen, either give me a get and let me go marry somebody else on whatever terms, or marry me. But you can't hold it against me that I didn't fulfill my promise. I didn't make the promise, my father did. So that's Admon's opinion. And Amar Rabbi Gamliel, as we had in the previous Mishnayot, right? Roa ani et divrei Admon. Admon makes a lot of sense. So this is the third time he said it, says, I agree with the words of Admon. Now, it says the Gemara, interestingly, this is a little different than the version we have in the Tosefta on Ketubot, the corresponding Braita. Matnitin deloki haitana. Our Mishnah is not like the Mishnah or the Braita in the Tosefta. The Tanya, this is a quote from our Tosefta. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, who is of course a later generation than Rabbi Gamliel and Admon, lo nechliku Admon v'chachamim ala posek ma'ot v'chatno. Now, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda said that Admon and the Chachamim do not disagree about his responsibility to her if the commitment was to give a certain amount of money, upashat lo et harega, and then the father went bankrupt, so he couldn't give the money. That the woman can say, it's not my personal responsibility. Abba pasak alai. My father agreed to give you $1 million. Mani lasot. I can't do anything. Now again, she says, divorce me, right? Maybe you only wanted to marry me because you were going to get $1 million. I understand that, but don't hold it against me and leave me, hanging, which is essentially what he said he was going to do, until you get paid your $1 million. It's not my fault. So unlike our Mishnah, which clearly said they argued about that case, the Braita says they don't argue about that case. Where do they argue according to the Braita? Al shepaska hi al atzma, where the woman herself made a commitment, where she said, now, it's a little tricky, and again, we're not going to have time to go through all the opinions here about what does that mean she committed herself, right? Because I assume and I'll remind you, even though it may not sound as nice as well, it's not so nice. there really was almost no mechanism for a woman to have any possessions in those times. Certainly not a daughter who has a father, right? So what does it mean? It's not like she had her own resources. Now, again, there are some very limited exceptions, but as we learned in Ketubot throughout, the rule was that she has very little of her own ability to have money. So what does that mean, she committed? So many understand it means that she committed her father's money, meaning she said, oh, my father's good for this. I know he pays, all his sons-in-law or whatever it was, but that she basically put a personal commitment to it, even though it was her father's money. It's a lot harder to understand that it would be her own commitment. But either way, so that says the Braita where they argue. The woman herself, in their engagement or pre-engagement, said, oh, my father will give you $1 million, right? And then Chachamim Omrim, well, she can't provide what she said. He has no responsibility, the husband, or the potential husband, the future husband, to marry her. And again, until he does nisuin, he's not responsible to take care of her. She's still in her father's house. So although she's married to him and she can't marry someone else, he doesn't have any, she's not in his reshut. He's not responsible for her, but it's her fault. But then Admon says, look, Yechola he shetomer, the wife can say, Kisfura ani, I thought Sha'aba notein alai. Look, I was relying on my father. I thought he was good for it. Now that my father can't do it, he really, and again, the case, as again, the Mishnah made it very clear, is not where the father changes his mind. It's where the father no longer can do it, right? He no longer has the money. So in that case, o knos o pitur, either get rid, let me either marry me, which might be the better outcome for her, or pater me by giving me a get. And that's where in the Braita, again, this is still a quote from the Braita, Amar Rabbi Gamliel, Ro'ani et divrei Admon. So again, so the Braita makes it unlike our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that they argue even if the father made the commitment. In the Braita, if the father made the commitment, we never hold the girl responsible. It's only if she made the commitment. Now, Tana, another Braita says, the Medvar Memurim, when is this whole Mishnah applicable? Bigidola. If she is of a mature age, again, usually means 12 or 12 and a half, when they get married. Avo b'ktana, if she's 9 years old or ktana otherwise, kofin, you force, now we don't know what force, who? It doesn't matter, kofin laman. I mean, who do you force? Ilay mala'av. If you're saying you force the father to pay, which goes against what I just told you, that maybe the father doesn't have the money, right? But if you're forcing the father, then it should be ibchami bayla. It should be the opposite, right? It should be a situation where we think this means where she committed, right? So if she's a ketana, why are you paying attention to the ketana? She said, my father said he's going to give you $1 million, but she's 6 years old, right? A lot of, or 9 years old, or an age where we don't trust her. So therefore, her statement about her father's commitment shouldn't have any effect, right? It should be the opposite. Elama Rava, you're right, it is the opposite. It's kofin libal litain get. If she was a gedola, that's where there's a machloket. Does she responsible for her father's commitment or her commitment of her father's commitment? But if she's a ketana, then you can never say that, oh, what she said reflected a commitment on her part. And everybody agrees, according to the Braita, that you force the husband, if he doesn't want to marry her, to give her a get. So he's forced to, which is what Admon said, but now it's saying everybody agrees with that. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Elazar, ben Elazar Mishmei de Chizkiah. Now, on a side point, which is very relevant to our Mishnayot, Kol makom she'amar Rabbi Gamliel, whenever Rabbi Gamliel says in these previous 3 Mishnayot, Ro'eh ani et divrei Admon, I like the opinion of Admon, halacha kemoto. That's how we paskin. That's what Rabbi Gamliel is basically being quoted in the Mishnah to say Admon is correct in these cases. We're seeing this is very important because the next few Mishnayot are going to have more cases of Admon, and Rabbi Gamliel does not agree with any of them, right? So in those cases, he doesn't comment, but is not stated as agreeing. Amrle Rava, the Rav Nachman, Afil beBraita. Is that true? Even if it's in a Braita, not in the Mishnah, like the Tosefta we just quoted. And Amrle said, I didn't say anything about a Mishnah. Ni kamina b'Mishnah. I didn't say we pass like him when it's in a Mishnah. But kol makom shamar Rabbi Gamliel kamina. Wherever Rabbi Gamliel says the opinion of Admon, that's how we pass it. Now, of course, the Braita disagrees with our Mishnah, right? So we don't pass like both. You have to, and we usually go with the Mishnah over a Braita. But the point is that if there's another place or similar place where Admon is supported by Rabbi Gamliel, that's how we paskin, whether it's in the Mishnah or a Braita. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Rabba bar Yirmiyah. Now, Reb Zera said in the name of Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, Shnei Dvarim Shamar Chanan, were the two statements that Chanan said, which are the first two Mishnayot in our parak, or the second and third, halacha, where am I? Halacha ki yotzeba. The halacha is like those who are with him, right? Meaning ki yotzeba means those who go along with him, which remember we quoted earlier that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right, agreed with Chanan. That's pretty heavy stuff. And the Shiva Dvarim Sha'amar Admon, the 7 halachot, we just had 3 of them, there'll be 4 more, that Admon said, Ein halacha ki yotzeba. Halacha is not like those who go with him, which implies it's not like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, right? Sorry, Rabbi Gamliel, not Rabbi Shimon. It's not like Rabbi Gamliel. Says Gemara, what do you mean? Mike Amar, what are you trying to say? If you're saying how I just explained it, that Shnei Dvarim Shamar Chanan halacha kamoto uki yotzeba, that the halacha is like Chanan and the people who go like him, meaning Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which is pretty reasonable, and the Shiva Dvarim Shamar Admon ein halacha kamoto v'lo ki yotzeba, right? It's not like him or those who go like him, meaning not like Rabbi Gamliel. But Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar Mishmei Chizkiah said, Kol makom shamar Rabbi Gamliel ro ani divrei Admon halacha kamoto. That directly contradicts the principle you just taught, which is that when Rabbi Gamliel says, I like Admon's opinion, that's how we basket. So how can you say we never basket like Admon, even when people are going with him, meaning Rabbi Gamliel? We just said you basket like Rabbi Gamliel all the time. So how do you reconcile that? Says more al-hachi kamar. This is how we should explain it. Shnei dvarim shamar Chanan halacha kamoto uki yotzei, right? When Chanan was quoted as saying things and someone supported him, meaning Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai supported him, then we paskin that way. And the 7 things that Admon said, again, we're in the middle of the series, we've done 3 of them, we're going to have several more today and tomorrow. The 7 things that Admon said, Ein halacha ki yotzei bo, halacha is not like him, hakimoto, but when someone goes with him, meaning when there's a partner with him, Rabbi Gamliel, halacha bikulu, right? Then the halacha is like him in all of them. So basically, when Admon's alone, we don't paskin like him, but when Rabbi Gamliel supports him, or someone supports him, then we do paskin like him. Says Gemara, is that true? Finally, we get to the end of this all. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar Mishmei Chizkiah, Kol makom shamar Rabbi Gamliel ro ani divrei Admon halacha kamoto. Amar in, he said that's exactly what he said. Lo amar. Amar in, lo amar lo. Implication is it's only Rabbi Gamliel says it, not when he doesn't. Elahachi kamar. This is the way you finally have to read it. Shnei dvarim shamar Chanan. The first thing, the 2 things of Chanan, not our Chanan, but the Chanan in the Mishnah said halacha kemoto ki yotzebo. That's we pass like Chanan because he's got Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on his side. Shiva dvarim shamar Admon yesh mehem halacha kemoto uki yotzebo. The yesh mehem she'en halacha kemoto elo ki yotzebo. Right. Meaning, the kol makom shamar Rabbi Gamliel ro ani divrei Admon halacha kamoto, but inachlo. So basically, whenever Rabbi Gamliel says, I support the opinion of Admon, which was this Mishnah and the 2 previous Mishnayot, then the halacha is like Admon, but in all of the other cases where Admon does not have a supporter, halacha is not like it. And we're bringing this partly because these are very practical halachot at the end of Ketubot, or practical in those times at least. And second of all, because the next mission is about to be another case of Admon in which Rabbi Gamliel does not agree with him. So what is that?
Is the halacha like Admon because Rabban Gamliel agrees with him, or it's just so happens? You know what I mean?
So yes. So I think the answer is probably the first one. I mean, it's a little hard to, meaning Rabbi Gamliel is essentially saying we came out with the halacha like Admon, and therefore I agree with him, essentially. Right? But the point is more that I think
differently now.
The rules of halacha are it's not clear that in ancient before we come out with the question of halacha kamoto, right? Presumably every place did their own thing. Admon disagreed, someone disagreed with Admon. Wherever you lived, you did that thing. Right? This concept that the Gemara comes up with, which our Gemara has and our Mishnah to some extent has, that there's one unified halacha that Rebbe Yehuda Nasi or some other central authority sort of established is not something that necessarily existed at the time of Admon, right? It's a later thing. So part of it is our Gemara establishing that because Rabbi Gamliel agreed with him, that becomes the established central halacha, right? So it's a question of exactly, this is a question I was just reading about it, but there's a whole discussion about what does Mishnah mean, right? There's a central repository of Mishnah, where everyone goes that way, which is how Rabbi Yehuda Nasi viewed the Mishnah, right? But before that, there were all kinds of Mishnayot, including Tosefta, that were established rules of any particular Beit Midrash. So, but this halacha, the Gemara, is a much later thing, and it's basically going like Rabbi Gamliel because Admon is supported by Rabbi Gamliel. Now, the next case, and this is not a specifically Ketubot case, but it is a continued discussion about Dinei Mamonot, which is Ha'orer al Hasadeh. A person, this is a very interesting case. A person calls an orer. Orer means like you make a claim, you like argue against ownership of a field, right? So I'm going to use names here. I might get them confused because it gets a little complicated. But let's say Reuven walks into Beit Din one day and he says, Shimon is claiming that he owns a field. I own the field and I live on the field. And I want to say this is my field, okay? Shimon pulls out a document. V'hu chatum aleh be'ed. Shimon pulls out a document that says that I, Shimon, sold this field to Levi. And you know who signed on the document? Reuven. So all of a sudden, Shimon says to Reuven, what do you mean you own this field? You signed a document that says that I sold this field to Levi, and you didn't make any complaints about it. So the fact that you signed the document implies that you agree that I own the field and I'm selling it to Levi, right? That seems like a pretty good proof. Admon says, no, it's not the case. Reuven can still claim you never owned the field, Shimon. And Levi doesn't own the field either because it's my field. Why did I sign a document that Shimon was selling it to Levi? Because I'm not so scared of Levi and I'm terrified of Shimon. So I wasn't going to go over to Shimon and say, give me back my field, but I'm going over to Levi and say, give me back my field. So I was happy for Shimon to sell it to Levi to get it out of his hands. Or as the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Hasheni noach li v'harishon kasha yimenu. The second guy, Levi in this case, is a nice guy, and Shimon's a terrifying guy. So I signed off to allow my field, Reuven says, to go to Levi. I'm sorry, Levi, that you had to pay $1,000, but I signed off so that I can collect it from Levi. And now Levi can go to Shimon and try to get his money back. But that Reuven can claim that I wasn't admitting that it's not my field. And the Chachamim say, no, Ibed is zchuto. You know, if you sign off on a field and say it's being sold, then you are implying that you accept the ownership right. Miriam, I think you missed the case, so I'll do it quickly again because it's important and complicated. The case here is that Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, I own this field. The case probably is that Reuven's living on the field, so he has a chazakah. But Shimon says, I own this field, and Reuven says, no, I own it. And then Shimon pulls out a document in which Shimon sold the field to Levi, and Reuven signed the document as a witness. So Shimon says, look, you signed the document and you admitted basically that it was my field. Says Admon, that's not the case, because Reuven can always claim that I knew the field was mine, but I didn't want to start up with you, Shimon. You're tough, big mafia guy. I wanted to get the field into Levi's hands so that I could go get the field from Levi. So I signed off on the sale because I wanted to keep my field, and I thought that would be the way to get it. So that's the Admon, and the Chachamim say, no way, that's too far-fetched. Now, who do you agree with? The Chachamim, right? Ibed zchuto, you lose your rights. Continues the Mishnah, asas siman la'acher ibed zchuto. Let's say you make this field to be a marker, meaning Shimon, again, same case. Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, I own this field on the northwest corner. Shimon pulls out a document in which Shimon sold the field to Levi, not the field in question, but the field next to it, right? And the way he identified, let's say you sold apartment B, right? And the way you identified, you said it's between my apartment A and, Shimon, not Shimon, and Yehuda's apartment D or whatever. But the fact is that you identified the adjacent field as being belonging to Shimon, and Reuven signed off on that. There's no potential benefit for that, right? Because it's not the field that they were selling. And so therefore you lose your zchut because you didn't stand up and say, I don't accept this the way this is written. So that's our mission. Now, Amar Abaya says something fascinating. Lo shanu ella aid. The only time that the Chachamim say that Reuven loses his rights to the field because he signed off that Shimon sold it to Levi, and so he's admitting that it's Shimon's field, is if Reuven's a witness, right? Because witnesses have to know that what they're signing is accurate. that Shimon actually owns the field and sold it to Levi. Avol Dayan, if they were the judge, right, after the shtar was signed, it went to a judge to establish whether it's correct. If the judge was Ruvain, and he said, this is a correct shtar, lo ibedet zchuto, then he doesn't lose his rights. Why? Because judges don't have to know anything, right? The Tani Rabbi Chia, ein ha'idim chotmin al shtar kein karu. Witnesses can only sign a shtar if they read it and they know what's written in it. So the fact that he signed it, turn the page, means that he knows what's written there. Avol dayanim chotmim afal pi shelo karo. Judges can sign up on a shtar even if they didn't read the shtar. What the heck does that mean? So what it means is that the main role of the dayanim in a shtar is establishing that the witnesses are accurate, meaning they compare the handwriting, they talk to the witnesses potentially. So all they're saying is that these people actually signed the shtar. We don't vouch for what's written in the shtar. We may not have even read the shtar, right? We just can say that the dates are correct, that the signatures are correct. It's a technicality. It's not a content. And therefore, Ruvain signing a shtar as a dayan or approving a shtar as a dayan does not mean that Ruvain agreed with what's written in the shtar. So then the Mishnah's final case was, or second case, was Asam Siman Lacher. If they made this field as a sign, meaning a border in the shtar, for another field that's being sold. Amar Abaya, Lo Shanu El Acher. It's fascinating. Also, it's only the case, again, if Ruvain claims that they own this field, I'm going to call it field A, right? I know this is confusing. And Shimon says, what are you talking about? It's my field. Ruvain says, no, I've always owned it. I've lived here for 20 years. I have a chazakah maybe. Shimon says, well, you got a chazakah, but look, I have a shtar in which it says, I'm selling field B, which is next to field A, to Levi. And you, Ruvain, signed that shtar. And in the shtar, it says, field B is bordered by field A, which is owned by Shimon, and field this and that and that. So it's specified in the shtar that field A was owned by me, by Shimon, and you signed on it. So you lose your rights. Says Abaya, you only lose your rights if they sold it to someone else. Ruvain Shimon was selling the field to Levi. Avol la'atzmo, but if Shimon is selling the adjacent field to Ruvain, lo ibedet zchuto, then Ruvain does not lose his rights. Because you know what he could have said? He could say, I knew this was bogus. I knew that Shimon was trying to, like, I went to Shimon and said, give me field A. And Shimon said, I'm never selling you field A. You have no proof, but I'll sell you field B, right? Where you want to get. So I knew that if I didn't sign off that field B is adjacent to Shimon's field A, he would never sell it to me. So I had something to gain by basically lying or basically, not accepting what's false because I wanted to buy the adjacent field. So I can say to Amar, if I hadn't listened to him and signed off on the shtar, lo havi mezavin leini hili, would have sold it to me, right? So it says Gemara, 1 second. Remember that there's a way out. What you should have done, Ruvain, is you should have gone to court and say, I'm signing this, but let me make a note, a confidential note to the judge that I'm signing this even though I don't believe it's true, right? Which is called a moda'ah. You can make a statement. What are you going to claim to Abaya? You can give a statement to the court, a confidential statement that I am signing this because I'm under duress, because I really want to buy the field. It's the first step in my multi-pronged legal approach to get my field back, right? But I want to announce officially that I'm not giving up my rights. Says where that's great, but there's no such thing as confidential statements because chavrecha chavre itlai. Your friend has a friend, and when you go give your confidential statement to the clerk in the court, they're gonna talk about it. And their friend chavrecha chavre de chavrecha chavre itlai. So you could claim I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to jeopardize my ability to buy field B, and so I didn't want to antagonize Shimon by saying, oh, by the way, field A that it's next to is mine, not yours. So I signed off on this because I wanted to gain field B, but in fact, field A is mine, I live on it, I have a chazakah, and I want to keep it. So that is how Abaya paskins. Now, we're like 7 lines from the top, who da asas siman la'acher, right? Someone, this is a very interesting case, Ruvain again in this case, made a siman to someone else. So meaning Ruvain claims he owns field A. Shimon says, I own field A. Shimon then goes and says, I'm selling field B to Levi. And Ruvain signs off, including the nomenclature in the shtar that this field B is next to field A, which is owned by Shimon. So, which our mission just said means that he gives up his rights, right? So in that case, what happened was here, that there was the whole case. Hahu da'asa siman la'acher, the person signed off as a siman for someone else, but ir. He then made a claim, no, but I really own field A. And then he died, the shachar. Then Reuven died. So now Reuven's got a bunch of orphans, a bunch of kids, an estate, and the estate wants to claim, like the father would have, that I own the field. But there's, like what happens is ukama petropa. So they assigned a what do you call it, a guardian, I guess, right, to represent the estate and to argue as for the deceased person and for their orphans. So Ata Apatrapa Lakameda Abaya, this guy, we'll call him an Apatropos, came in front of Abaya. Amrele, he said, look, Abaya said to him, Asasi man lacher, Mishnah says, if you make the field as a border for another field, ibedet zchuto. So sorry, Reuven's estate does not get this field. Amrele, so 1 second, says the Apotropos, hold on. If Reuven was alive, you know what he would have said? Havita'in va'amar telem echad asiti lecha. He would have argued and said, no, there's only one row in the field that is owned by Shimon, meaning it's a 2-acre field, right? And field A. Field B is a 2-acre field. Reuven signed off on a shtar that said, Shimon is selling field B to Levi, and it's bordered by Shimon's field A. But that doesn't prove that the whole field A is owned by Shimon. All it proves is that there's one strip of land on the border between A and B that's owned by Shimon, one telem, one row, right? So you can't prove that I signed off the whole field. You can only prove that I signed off one row of the field. So if Reuven was alive, he could have said, telem echad asiti lecha, I only gave him one, there's only one row in the field. So I said, you're right, that's a good argument. Shapir Kamri, Dam Reb Yochanan, because Reb Yochanan specifically said that if Reuven is alive and he says, Ta'an, Ba'amar, tell him echad asiti lecha, ne'aman, he's believed. Again, this is very tricky, and I don't think we're going to get too far into it tonight. But many Rishonim discuss why the heck would you believe this kind of argument. So the Rishonim add that there's probably this. I kept saying there's a chazakah. Now, presumably Reuven lives on this land, right? So there's actually other factors at force here which make us think. It's not like Reuven's walking in out of the blue and saying, I own the Empire State Building. Right? I mean, it's not, there's chazakah going on here, and there's other reasons to think this. But Rabbi Yochanan did say that if Reuven claims, I signed off that field B borders field A that's owned by Shimon because Shimon owns a strip of land, that Reuven would be believed, right? So therefore, he's believed. So said Abaya to the Apotropos, so, okay, it's true that Reuven would have been believed if he was alive. He's dead now. And it sounds like Reuven's, and this again is how we show him say, Reuven's orphans or Reuven's family are living in the field, but at least Zil Havle Mia Telem Echad, right? You have to at least give one row to Shimon because you wrote in the star before Reuven died that field B borders field A, which belongs to Shimon. So Shimon owns at least one row in the field. Says the Gemara, okay, so he was going to do it, but the problem was Havi Alav Richba de Dikla. That one border had this great row of what do you call Dikla, like palm trees, right? So it had a wonderful row of fruit on it. So he didn't want to give away that row. That was the most favorable row in the whole field. So Amar Lei, so the Apotropos said, look, if Reuven was alive, Havitan va'amar, you know what he would have said? He would have said, although I wrote in the star that it borders Shimon's row, I went back after I signed the star and bought it back from Shimon. Again, it must be the case that he's living on it now. Otherwise, this makes no sense. So Amrle, so Abaye said, Shapir Kamri, that's correct also. Amr Rabbi Yochanan said, if Reuven was alive, and Ta'an va'amar chazarti v'lekafti mimenu, if Reuven came in and said, I went back after I signed the document and I bought it from Shimon, Ne'aman, he's believed. So therefore, all these claims of the Apotropos are valid, and you can't basically kick the Yatomim out of the field. And Amr Abaye pointed out after this whole story, Haiman demukim Apotropa, if you're looking to assign a Apotropos for your estate, this is a good guy to hire. I would definitely go for this one. I'm Nukim ki hay. You should definitely hire this agency. Got 5 stars from Abaya. The Yada lafuche b'zchuta diyatmi, because he knows how to look after the rights of the Yitomim. So this is a really a highly rated Apotropos. Again, as I said, I tried to allude to some of the complications, but it seems very likely that this is a case where Ruvain and his children are living on the field, right? And that's what changes the whole thing. It's not like Reuven and Shimon both showed up and this one says, this is my field, and she said, this is my field. There's a chazaka at play here, but the thing is that no matter how strong your chazaka is, if you have a shtar that says it's not my field, you could have lived here for 50 years, right? If there's a deed that says it's not yours, it's not yours. So the question really is, what's the validity of that deed? And that's what our whole Mishnah is discussing.
I guess you got to make sure that you sign, that the Adim sort of have to really read what they're signing. I mean,
Right.
right?
So that's what we said. The Adim have to at least read what they're signing. And if you,
You
don't,
know,
and if you don't argue, right. So again, that's where the cases are. There might be times where you wanted to do it because you needed the field anyways. But yeah, you're responsible for what you sign. One more case, one more Mishnah today. Mishahalach the Medinat Hayam. A person goes, this has to happen, right, all the time. Person goes to Bermuda, now this says. I was going to say to wherever Marco Polo went, somewhere there. Anyways, you travel, you come back 20 years later, and your house is beautiful. It hasn't fallen apart. But unfortunately, there are apartment buildings on every side of your house. And you lost Ibda Derech Sadeo. There's no pathway to your Sadeh. People have bought up the land on every side, and they are blocking your access. So you own a beautiful piece of land, but you can't get there. So now, of course, the issue is that before you went away on your 20-year adventure, you had a way to get to your land. But there's just no way right now to document where that was. Who took your right of way, right? We have no way of knowing. So what do? Admon says, Yelich lo b'kitzara. You know what? You pick the shortest route from the highway to your field, and you have right of way. You can go and say, this is the only way, this is the quickest way to get to the field. I'm going to take the minimum amount, but you can what's it called? Eminent domain, right? You can displace somebody else from that way because you had to have had a way to get to your field. Chachamim say, no, what can you do? Yiknelo derech mea mana. You're screwed, right? You can pay $100,000 to buy a strip of land. Oh, yifrach la'avir, or fly, so you're in trouble. You have no way to prove it. These guys will get together and they'll charge you $1 million for that, strip of land, which of course happens all the time, I'm sure, right? So that's our mission. Now,
I guess the point is you should have appointed somebody to guard your,
right.
protect your rights while you were gone or something.
Classic case, right? Your land was 10 miles out of town. You never thought the village would extend there. You come back into the middle of Manhattan, right? So it's.
I remember somewhere, probably in Bava Batra, there was something, it may not be exactly like this case, that if you own land, there is an assumption that your neighbor is going to allow you access to it somewhere, but I don't remember where that's from, and it might not be comparable.
No, so there is, you are correct. The Bava Batra, we do have a long discussion about access to fields and when you buy things. The issue here is not a question of when you buy a field, do you buy access to it also, right? It's a question of you had access, we just don't know where it was, right? So you, again, that's the case. So you had a marshland out in, Hamilton Heights, as we call it. And then over 20 years, the city was built around it. So it's hard to know who should give you the land, if anyone. So ask the Gemara one second. My time of the Rabbanan. What's the reason for the Rabbanan who say that you don't have to give him any land? Shaper Kamar Admon, right? Admon is clear that somebody owes you property, right? You definitely had an access point before you went away, and no one disagrees with that. We just don't have any clear markings of where that was. So why don't we just let you pick the shortest route? Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, the case is a little bit more complicated. It's Kegon Shekifuha Arba B'nei Adam Arba Ruchotav. Look, if one person bought up all the land around you, you can go to that person and say, look, I know I have access. I'll take the shortest possible access through your land. But the problem is that there are 4 different owners of the 4 different fields on each side. So if you go to owner A, he can say, maybe it's in field B. And field B could say, maybe it's in field C. So how can you prove that any one of them should give you some land, right? Says the Gemara, well, okay, if that's the case, my time at the Admon. Why does Admon let you pick the shortest route? Maybe it was in field C, and the shortest route is in field A. Amarava, it's the cases, ba'arba da'atu mikoch arba'a, ba'arba da'atu mikoch chad kol yama lo pligi. Look, in a case where 4 people come from 4 separate purchases, you're right. You couldn't claim that you have a right of way because each one of them can say, maybe you should go to the next one. And if 4 people came from one, meaning it was all owned by one person, then you wouldn't have a right because that one person clearly owed you a path and couldn't have sold that. Lo pligi de matzimat chile, right? Ki pligi bechad ati mikoch arba'a. The case here is where one person owns the land on all 4 sides of it, but he bought it from 4 different people. So you, Reuven, who showed up from overseas, go to this one guy, Shimon, and say, look, you own land on all 4 sides of me. I definitely had access before I went away. I want access from your lands, and I want to go the shortest way, right? Or you can make, or I'll go the longest way, but I need something. And Shimon says, look, wait a second. I bought these 4 fields from A, B, C, and D. Each of them is not responsible to give you a place. So why do I have to give you a place, right? So Admon Savar Bikol Makom, Darkei Yitzchak Gabach. I can say to Shimon, I don't know, I know you bought the fields from 4 people, but I own a property, I own a path somewhere in your fields. And Rabbanan Savri, look, you could say to him, Ishatket, if you're quiet, be quiet. Meaning if you don't make this claim, I won't say anything. But Ilo, you know what? If you want to really claim, if you insist, say the Rabbanan, say Shimon would say the name of Rabbanan to Reuven, if you insist on getting your plot, Ma'adrina Shtara the Mariah, I would just return the shtarot to their owners. Meaning I'll just revert the sales. And you'll have no claim against those people. Now, of course, you can't just revert a sale, right? So the Rishonim explain, or some Achronim really more, explain that what he's saying is that the fact is that this is what I bought, right? I bought all the rights that Reuven had, that A had, and B had, and C had, and D had. I'm one person, but the rights that each person sold me involve the right to refuse you a right of way. And so therefore I can do that as well. Hahuda Amar Lahu Dikla Livrat. One more case we'll have just to rile everyone up. There was a man who was on his deathbed, or maybe not on his deathbed, but before he died, he said, I want to give this dekel to my daughter. Now, just to remember, a dekel was a very valuable, especially a mature dekel, right? It's like saying I'm giving an apartment, right, or a business. Right? A dekel would produce a lot of whatever fruit they produce, and be very valuable. A lot of lulav in it, and be very valuable. So this father said, I want to give this dekel to my daughter, and then he died. And let's say that there's 3 sons. I'm just going to pick a number, doesn't matter. And so they inherit everything, and they split up the fields 3 ways and left no trees for the daughter, right? Azo yatmi plog lenichse loyavle dikla. They didn't leave a tree for the daughter. So this daughter sues, right? Maybe it's her sister, unfortunately, right? And she says, where's my dekel? So he came to court, and Rav Yosef thought, this is our Mishnah. She definitely owns a dekel, but none of the sons can be proved that it's in their field, right? Because A, B, and C, let's call those 3 sons, you got it? Each one of them can say to their sister, go to Shimon, go to Levi, go to Reuven, right? It's just like our Mishnah, where the man went away, he knows he has a right of way, he doesn't know where it is, and everyone can push him to the next person. So this daughter's out of luck. She doesn't have her dekel. So that's what Rav Yosef thought. Amalei Abaye said to him, no, it's not similar at all. Midam, it's not, is it similar? Hatam kol chad echad matzi madchila. There's 4 owners in the 4 directions, or there's one owner who bought it from 4 people. They can push them off to the other person. But hacha dikla gabayohu, right here, the father gave the dekel to the daughter. So before he died, she owned the dekel. The question is which one of them took it, but it's on their responsibility to prove it, not her responsibility. So since before the father died, she already owned the dekel, there's a dekel, they would have to prove that it's not in my field, which they obviously can't. So they come up with some agreement to make sure she gets a dekel. So so what do? What they should do is they should exclude 1 dekel from the Yerusha. When the father died, 1 dekel goes to the daughter, and then they split it up again. Right? Let's say there's 9 other trees, right? They would split it 3 ways. So they basically view the dekel for her coming out before they split it up, because Yerusha does not work the same way as our Mishnah. Now, while we're on the topic of giving your daughter a dekel, which seems like a nice gift, Ahud Amar Lahu Dikla Livra, there was a man who said, there was a man who said, I want one of my beautiful, amazing palm trees to go to my daughter to sustain her, and shachim, and then he died. And when they went to look at the estate owned 4 palm trees and 2 half palm trees. How do you own half a palm tree? You own it in partnership, right? So there were 2 of these palm trees were very valuable things. So 2 of the trees were owned in partnership. Now, of course, everybody knows no one wants things in partnership. You got to agree with the partner. You got to, have a joint thing. So this daughter comes and says, I don't want a partnership tree, right? I want my own tree. And the sons, of course, say, we don't want to deal with these other partners. So we're going to give you the 2 half trees. That's going to equal the 1 tree our father said you should get. Again, very nice brothers, apparently, right? So the tree pagi de dikla. There's 2 half trees in the estate. Yativ Rav Ashi the kakashilai. Rav Ashi was wondering, is that when a father says, I want my daughter to have a tree, does he mean 2 half trees? Is 2 half trees equal a tree? Mi karul in shila tree pagi dikla dikla Allah. Does a person refer to that as 1 tree, meaning because in value, I guess it's 1 tree, or is it not considered what he wanted? Amali Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi hachi amar avimi mihagunya mishmei derava karu in shila tree pagi dikla dikli. Dikla. People do call that. People would say, I'll sell you a tree. And what they mean is I'll sell you the rights, 50% of rights of 2 trees. And so because that's the usage, again, we go always with usage, then when the father said, I want my daughter to have a palm tree, it doesn't mean I want her to have her own palm tree. It might mean, if the brothers wanted to mean, half of 2 palm trees, in which case the brothers are allowed to give her, the 2 partnership trees and keep the rest for themselves. So that's our Gemara, and that's, I guess, how we paskin. I'm not sure how relevant all this, because again, it all depends on what people call it, right? So as the Gemara clearly says, so it would all depend on local custom. Okay, we'll stop there, and I guess we'll have more of Admon tomorrow. Tomorrow daf will be, I think 7:15, 7:30. I don't know what time it happens in the morning. Sometime in the morning.
Sometime in the morning.
7:45.
7:45. Okay, I wasn't even close. And then maybe we'll discuss on the chat about the CM, but it's good to be back and learning. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Yasher Koach.
Thanks.